You're listening to the Vocabit podcast, where I help students improve their vocabulary for the SAT, ACT, and life itself using my unique and research-backed story-based method. On this podcast, I'm sharing the best tips and tricks for a more enriched vocabulary and pain-free test day. Hello, and welcome to episode 37 of the Vocabit podcast. I'm a.ka Abbott, a former English and history teacher, the author of the young adult novel Ahead of Her Time, and the founder of the eponymously named vocabulary company, Vocabit. So in the last episode, I briefly spoke about this guy, Marcus Manlius. He was an ancient Roman who led the defense against the Gauls. And I said at the time that, we're talking about etymology. It is a linguistic crime that we do not get the word manly from this guy. But to be fair, roots about men and manliness are actually really interesting in their own right. The Latin word for man was vir, spelled V-I-R. We would pronounce it ver. So if you are virtuous, V-I-R, virtuous, at its core, that word isn't just saying you're a good person. It's really more saying, wow, that's really manly of you to be such a good person. And so especially if you're saying that to a woman, it's like, okay, thanks. So linguistically, as a woman, you can be good like a man, virtuous, but it's also possible to be too manly. If you're too assertive, too strong, you become a virago, V-I-R-A-G-O, virago. Virtuous means you're manly in a good way. Virago means you're manly in a bad way. If you've read Ahead of Her Time, there's a brief reference to the first and second triumvirate, basically ancient alliances. And let's now say that you're taking AP World or something, and the first or second triumvirate comes up. If you don't know anything about roots, you might see first triumvirate and be like, this is a huge word. I have no idea what it means. But when you start to see words as building blocks, that word is going to speak to you really quickly. Triumvirate has two really clear blocks, tri and vir. Tri means three, vir means man. So a triumvirate, this is three guys who got together to do something and it's form an alliance. There are so many vir words hiding in the English language. Some are kind of snarky, like we've seen, like virtuous, you're good like a man. Virago, you're too manly for a woman. Some vir words are more straightforward. If you see the word virility, it means state of manliness. But what about virus? We're all talking about him these days. Is a virus something that a man perpetuates? According to the Oxford English Dictionary, we actually get the word virus from the Latin word for snake venom. And I don't know about you, but when I read that, I was like, wait, how did snake venom get in here? You can't always guarantee that if you see a root, it's the one that you know. Sometimes roots like to hide in different words. Last week we spoke about mon, and sometimes, you might see mon, but what you're really seeing is mono, which means one. So sometimes they like to hide in other roots or come from different languages. But in this case, at least according to this academic, David Porush, I'll link the article in the show notes, there is a connection here, and it's kind of inappropriate, but also interesting. It's hypothesized that before the Romans, the Proto-Indo-European word vir, V-I-R, or ver, however you want to pronounce it, meant stick or rod. And then the Romans came in and decided that they wanted to define themselves by the sticks in their pants, and they started calling themselves virs, or as they would pronounce it, viri, technically, V-I-R-I. Tangentially, snakes sometimes look like sticks, so the poison they spit out evolves into virus. Words are just so funny to me. You see these big fancy words in the dictionary, virago, the manly woman, all these SAT and GRE words. And at least in this case, they trace their roots back to a bunch of ridiculous Romans calling themselves the stick guys. I love this quote from the David Porush article where I found the snake connection. He writes about language, and I've modified this quote slightly, so pretend I'm putting some ... between the sentences. Dictionaries are, by definition, definitive, making pronouncements on fluid meanings as if they're fixed. It's not really an error, but words are a cluster of images and metaphors that crowd and seep. I might even say infect each other, end quote. This is so true, as anyone who's invented their own language or slang or whatever knows. Words have different meanings to different people, but there's usually a common thread that you can trace through them. And if you find it, the root back can be really interesting. I hope you learned something about the root vir today, vir. Basically, etymologically, associate it with the word man, but know that sometimes there are double entendres involved, and quite frankly, given the source and the meaning, that shouldn't be too surprising. I'll see you guys on Thursday.